If you dig deep enough into human history, one thing is always there. Faith. It's a constant. But what's really fascinating is that throughout history, people have been both its most loyal followers and, believe it or not, its greatest shapers. So today, we're going to unpack the incredible story of how one of the world's oldest faiths was totally transformed by looking at the really crucial difference between Mosaism and Judaism.
So let's just jump right in with the big question, the one at the heart of all this. Is the universal philosophy that Moses taught the same thing as the Judaism that's practiced today? Well, according to the source material we're looking at, the answer is a pretty clear no. So how did one turn into the other? Let's get into it.
All right, so our story starts with this idea that the world's major religions, they weren't always separate. They weren't these disconnected boxes we see today. The idea is that they were all part of one single, ancient belief system. But, as we're about to see, human hands got involved and started drawing lines where there weren't any before.
And this quote really gets to the core of it. Faith itself, that feeling, that connection, that's the constant. But religion, the rules, the rituals, the whole structure, that has been bent, molded, and reshaped again and again. Grasping this one idea is the key to understanding everything else that's coming.
According to our source, the story we usually hear about this big, immediate split between the family lines of Ishmael, the ancestor of Muslims, and Isaac, the ancestor of Jews, it isn't exactly how it went down. At first, they were all on the same page, following the one unified philosophy from their father, Abraham. That big separation, that came way, way later. Okay, so now we get to the real heart of our question. What is the fundamental difference between the original faith of Moses and the religion we now call Judaism? Well, the first clue starts with a name I'm sure you all know, Israel. You see, the name Israel was first given to Abraham's grandson, Jacob. And what it means is, well, it's a huge clue. It translates to El's soldier, or one who strives with El. So who's El? It's the ancient original root word for God. It's actually the same root that gives us Allah or Ilah. It points to a universal creator, not just a god for one tribe. And this right here just lays out the divide so clearly. Mosaism, the philosophy of Moses, was all about simple, universal teachings. Believe in one God, don't do evil, be a good person. It was a spiritual path for anyone. Judaism, on the other hand, grew out of the identity of one specific tribe, the people led by King Judah. It became much more focused on rituals, on identity, and eventually on political goals. So here's the bottom line, the key takeaway. Mosaism was the original spiritual philosophy. Judaism was the name given to the tribal and cultural identity that formed around that philosophy. But they weren't the same thing. One was a universal faith, the other became a national religion. So how in the world did a universal faith get transformed into a tribal identity? The source points to one single dramatic event in history, the Babylonian Exile. This was the moment, it's argued, that the original faith was changed, fundamentally and forever. Now, to really get the impact here, we need a little bit of context. So the original United Kingdom of Israel, it eventually split into two. The southern part, the Kingdom of Judah, was later conquered by the massive Babylonian Empire, and its people were taken away as captives. And this wasn't just a weekend trip, this was a long, long exile. 90 years. I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. That is long enough for your kids and your grandkids to be born and raised in a completely foreign land. You're living under the influence of a totally different culture, a different set of beliefs. 90 years is long enough for your original culture and faith to be forgotten, or worse, to be corrupted.
And that is exactly what the source claims happened. During this long exile, the original simple faith got mixed up with all sorts of Babylonian mysticism, magic, and ancient lore. That straightforward spiritual path of Moses was fused with the rituals, the beliefs, and even the powerful gods of their captors. And the biggest change, the most profound shift, was in the very idea of God. The universal, compassionate, and forgiving God, El, was essentially replaced. And in his place, the source argues, came this new figure called Yahweh, a God who was vengeful, angry, and warlike, a God who crushed his enemies and demanded absolute, strict obedience.
And when you change the nature of God, well, everything else starts to change too. All of a sudden, new worldly goals started to pop up. The idea of a chosen race began to form. The focus shifted away from individual spiritual growth and toward earthly power and political aims, like rebuilding the temple and setting up a kingdom on earth, which were the seeds of what would later become Zionism.
But the story doesn't stop there. The trail of this transformation, it actually goes even deeper. In this last section, we're going to follow the clues, like detectives, the ones left behind in old myths and language, to see if we can figure out where these new ideas really came from.
Okay, this is absolutely fascinating. It's like finding a fossil in a rock. The original name of God, El, is perfectly preserved in the names of the archangels. Gabriel means El's strong man. Raphael means El's healing man. These names are like little echoes from a time before the exile, pointing right back to that original, universal God. But you know how human imagination works. As the stories got told and retold, they got bigger, more elaborate, more dramatic. Just take the angel of death. Later on, storytellers came up with these incredible, almost sci-fi descriptions of a being with wings that cover the entire sky and a cold breath that just sucks the soul right out of you.
And here's the kicker. This is a perfect example of what we're talking about. The name we all associate with the angel of death, Azrael, it's nowhere in the original scriptures. Not in the Torah, not in the Quran. It's a complete human invention, something that was added to the mythology centuries later.
So, this brings us to our final, and maybe the most provocative question of all. If the original God was El, where did this new, angry, warlike figure of Jehovah really come from? Who was he modeled on? The source material we're looking at makes a truly startling connection. It suggests that this new God figure was a reflection of a being the Jewish people met in Babylon, their chief god and legendary god king Marduk.
So who was Marduk? Well, he was the supreme god of Babylon, a being of incredible power. But some of the ancient texts describe him in really strange terms, as a humanoid or even an alien-like god king who, legend has it, once ruled over Egypt in the distant past. And that leaves us with this final, powerful question to think about. Was the transformation of God during the Babylonian exile not just a corruption of faith, but the creation of a new God in the image of a man? Or maybe a memory of an ancient Babylonian king? The answer to that is a matter of faith, a matter of history, and as we've seen, a matter of human hands.